Okay, I think I'm going to kick off because we've got quite a lot to get through today. Welcome. This is the workshop for the place-based carbon calculator. If you were at the keynote this morning, you will have seen Greg give a little demo of it. So maybe you've been primed already. Just to give you an agenda of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to give a short introduction about the tool, and then Richard Walker from the Department of Transport is going to take you on a carbon footprinting journey across West Yorkshire. And then hopefully we're going to go into some breakout rooms and do a series of small exercises. And these exercises are outlined in the handout, and the link for that is at the bottom of all my slides, and I will post it again in the chat if you've joined a little bit late. So please download that handout. So what is the place-based carbon calculator? So it's a new free tool that we've produced, and it shows the average per person carbon footprint for every lower super output area in England. If you haven't come across lower super output areas, they're statistical neighbourhoods that were created for the census to have between about 1,500 and 3,000 people. So it's very local, very place-based. And the tool includes the whole carbon footprint, but we're focusing on the transport side of it today because that's what the conference is about. So if you haven't tried it already, go to www.carbon.place and have a look at it yourself. But just to give you a very quick tutorial of what the tool can do, it's an interactive map, so you can pan and zoom as you would with any other map. The menu bar down the right-hand side controls all the things that you can add or change on the map. So you can change what data is shown, you can add and remove layers, things like local authority boundaries, and each layer comes with a little bit of an explanation. But the most important feature is that for all these little LSOA neighbourhoods, you can click on them and you get the pop-up report. And this little report card is like a couple of pages that explains everything that's going on with the carbon footprint in your area. For example, across the top, you get the tabs, which give you different pages of information. And you also get these little interactive graphs that you can click on and get more information. And then just to bring out a couple of the transport features that we're really going to focus on today are the public transport stops layer, which shows you the location of all bus stops, tram stops, train stops, and they're color coded by their frequency of service. So it's a useful way to get a very quick overview of the quality of the public transport in an area. And another layer here shown is the 15-minute travel time isochrones, which show you how far you can travel in 15 minutes by different modes of travel. So two useful tools for understanding the local context for public transport. So the things you're going to need for this workshop today are you're going to need your web browser because we're going to be using the Carbon Place tool. I suggest you have a way to take notes, whether that's on your computer or just pen and paper. And as I said, you need the handout. So here's the link again, nice and big. If you haven't got the handout, please get it now, and I will pop it into the chat again as well. So I'm going to hand over now to Richard, who's going to take you on our carbon journey.
Right. Well, thanks for that introduction, Malcolm. And before we go to the workshop session where we'll be using the carbon calculator to examine places of your own choice, I'm going to show you some of the tools capabilities by what I'm calling a carbon footprint journey. I'm going to show how the carbon calculator can be used to, firstly, to understand in detail the carbon footprint of different kinds of places with their particular demographic and built environment characteristics. And secondly, to show how it can be used to help every place or neighbourhood develop its own most effective decarbonisation plan. Just a quick caveat, the tool is not limited to transport, but I'm just looking at transport carbon footprint in this presentation. So this carbon footprint journey is in Leeds City region. If you don't know where that is, it's in the centre of UK, in the north of England. It's a large urban industrial region of population of nearly 3 million people. Here's how the city region looks in the carbon calculator, showing the carbon footprint per head of every neighbourhood or LSOA in the city region, which is, as we said, has a population of between 1.5 and 3,000. The bluer shades are places with below the English average carbon footprint, and the redder shades are those with above the English average. The carbon calculator can show different data layers. The previous map showed total carbon footprint, all sources. This layer is carbon footprint per head from driving cars. It gives a different map and helps us to start to ask questions, why are we seeing these patterns? So let's zoom in on the Leeds to Harrogate railway line, which is a typical suburban railway linking the city region centre with one of the city region's secondary towns, Harrogate. The 6 intermediate stations en route provide one way of semi-randomly selecting the different types of places found in the city region. Here is the simple 2-factor categorization of place types we're going to use for this workshop. There are 3 types of built environment or population density: rural, suburban, urban, and 2 types of disposable income level or affluence or deprivation level, more affluent or more deprived. It's a simplification, but I did want to show how closely related carbon footprint is to deprivation level. The left-hand map shows the index of multiple deprivation. The red areas are the most multiply deprived, and the green areas are the least multiply deprived, the most prosperous areas. And looking at the carbon calculator on the right-hand side, we can see almost a photographic negative. The more prosperous have the higher emissions, and the less prosperous have the lower emissions in blue. So let's start our journey. We start the journey at Leeds City Station in the centre of Leeds. You can see the new southern entrance to the station in the middle of the photo, sitting dramatically in the middle of the River Aire, which flows through the middle of Leeds. Leeds City Centre has seen a lot of new residential in the past 25 years, mostly the construction of new flats and the conversion of old industrial buildings to flats. It has a modern, cosmopolitan, quite affluent urban population. So what does the carbon calculator show? The carbon calculator, on the left-hand side, we see the carbon calculator scores for this neighbourhood against the average for England as a whole, for a whole range of carbon uses. An F score means that the area is in the highest 10% of neighbourhoods for emissions. It's in the worst performing decile. An A score means the area is in the lowest 10% of neighbourhoods in England for emissions. It's in the best performing decile. In Leeds City Centre, we see that the A rating for low car use, because this is an area where most people can walk to work and can walk to the railway station for further, more distant journeys. The A rating for low car use happens to be more than offset by the F minus rating, the F plus rating for taking flights. So we can see that if we look at the table in the top card with the table with the numbers, a carbon footprint of about 12, on average, 12 tons of carbon dioxide per person per year. 1/3 of that is transport, and of that, the low car use is more than offset by the high propensity to fly. We can also see that, and that means that the average for the area is 45% above the England average, which means that to stay within our Paris commitments, the average person in this area must cut their carbon footprint by 77% by 2032. So that's quite an unusual place, Leeds City Centre. Let's move out to our second area, which is Burley Park, the first stop on the railway line. And this is a classic English inner city suburb, mostly developed out in the 19th century with terraced houses, with lots of infill development from different eras since. And in the photo, you can see the famous Headingley cricket and rugby grounds in the top of the area. This is a student area of Leeds with a lot of students living here, but only about 1/3 of the population are students. Other people are sort of what we might call classic inner city residents. So what does the calculator show for Burley Park? And here we see that the average carbon footprint, the total carbon footprint of 5.5 tons, is below the England average. And this is particularly low use of cars, but also quite low take-up of flights. So we can see that this area is 65% of the English average carbon footprint, and the cut required by but the cuts required by 2032 is still nearly half. So even this area has got to cut its footprint by nearly half. Let's move out. So the next 3 stations along the route, Horsforth, no, sorry, the 3 stations that have what I call a suburban built environment, Horsforth, Pannal and Hornbeam Park, which are in the edge of Harrogate. This is a very classic kind of English suburban environment on the edge of towns. People living in detached, privately owned houses, room on the drive for a couple of cars per household, at a population density which is quite normal for an English city region. But these areas are actually quite prosperous. And what we can actually see in these affluent suburban areas is a very, very high carbon footprints indeed. So Horsforth, Pannal and Hornbeam Park are all well above 2/3 or double the English average per head, which means that they need to cut their carbon emissions by 80% by 2032 to stay within our Paris commitments. And we can have a look at the role of transport emissions in that. And we see that all of these suburbs, people are driving, having more car emissions than the English average, and are taking more than double the number of flights that's compared to the English average. Now, a lot of people would say, you know, maybe these areas have no choice but to use the car, but actually these suburban areas actually have, as well as the access to rail service, have a good bus service, and they're all within comfortable cycling distance of their nearest town centre. The Hornbeam Park in Harrogate is a short 5-minute cycle ride to the town centre. So alternatives are already there, but they're not currently being used. Why? The final area I want to bring in is Weeton, which is the station in the sort of rural area between Leeds and Harrogate. It's the most rural area on this journey. And I want to make the argument that it's actually a kind of peri-urban settlement. It's not really a farming community. It's an area in the countryside where people are living a suburban lifestyle, which is closely linked to the city region economy as a whole. And that's the kind of environment that people are living in, the kind of houses people live in. And let's have a look at what the carbon calculator says about them. So it's not as affluent as the suburban areas, but the car use is in the worst performing decile, and the flights is also above the English average. So the cut required, so it's 40% or 38% above the English average emissions, and the cut required by 2032 is 75%. And again, we might say that this area's got no choice, but as well as a train every 30 minutes to Leeds and Harrogate, there is an hourly bus to Bradford, and there is, you know, there are opportunities to reduce your car use, but it has to be said that it's more difficult in an area like this to reduce car use than than in the other areas we've seen so far. So I just wanted to, I can finish up this section with the issues that are for transport decarbonisation highlighted by this journey. Firstly, that total emissions are the mirror image of the index of multiple deprivation. And in my opinion, the lowest hanging fruit for transport decarbonisation is for the more affluent communities to take action to reduce their transport carbon footprint. There tend to be people who can afford to do so. The second thing that really jumped out at me was the carbon footprint of taking flights is very large. And if we're serious about decarbonisation in a hurry, we're going to have to look at that in terms of behaviour change. And the third one, of course, which is to do with what we're going to do in this workshop, is car use is location dependent. Where people live is crucial to how they access their jobs and the things they need. So if I've got time, Malcolm, I'm just going to very quickly just run through how to use the carbon calculator to develop a decarbonisation plan with a community. And I'm going to show you 2 features. The 50-minute isochrone function, which can be turned on to show, which can be used to show communities how they, how they can access facilities, what's within their 15-minute isochrone. And the other data set which is contained within the tool, which is journey to work and the potential of cycling data set, which I'll just show you very quickly. So accessibility planning. So the carbon calculator could be used to engage communities in how they can decarbonise their travel needs. And what the calculator can do is show what can be reached in 50 minutes using walking and cycling, which is the green and the blue on the middle map, and what can be accessed if you're with walking and using public transit. And so there's an example from Pannal, which was the station on the edge of Harrogate I showed you earlier. The second set of data set that you can bring up using the tool is the is data from the census on journey to work and on the propensity to on the potential propensity to cycle. So if we look at, say, for example, a contrast of Weeton and central Harrogate, we can see that the mode share of trips is in the top two circles, and the distance traveled by mode is in the bottom two circles. And what this shows, that even in an area such as central Harrogate, where a quarter of people walk to work, the majority of miles travelled in journeying to work are by car, and that's people who live in central Harrogate but work elsewhere. So that's what we've got to keep an eye on with respect to carbon footprint. And the final thing I just want to show is difficult to see. I'll be very quickly, Malcolm. The outer circle shows the propensity, the potential for cycling in those areas. So if you look at central Harrogate, the top right-hand circle, you'll see that there's always very low use of cycling to work. In fact, nearly a quarter of all trips to work could be used using cycle. So that's what I want to finish up, is to say we have an opportunity to use the carbon calculator to work with communities to come up with solutions. And we can avoid, I would like to think that one of the lessons I've learned is that if we work with the more affluent communities who might have the more capacity to get involved, we can avoid making too many demands on the hard-pressed communities in the immediate term, which is one way of approaching what I call a just transition. So I hope that's a good enough introduction.